Welcome to part 2 of chapter 7. We are talking about the shifting fortunes of colonial empires in the 18th century as Spain began a long process of decline and England and France fought to replace Spain as the dominant global power. We are talking about the Bourbon reforms happening pretty much in the latter half of the 18th century. The Bourbons attempted to restructure their administrative apparatus in the New World by establishing new viceroyalties. They also established new offices for intendants and subdelegados in 1764, and they created miniature viceroys. They created two new viceroyalties in Bogota in 1739 and Buenos Aires in 1776. They also created high courts known as audiencias in Caracas and Buenos Aires. Another area they attempted to bring reforms was in the area of the power of the church. The absolutist kings of the 18th century Europe viewed the Catholic Church as another rival temporal power, another empire, if you will. The Jesuits especially represented a threat to the Spanish and Portuguese ministers of state as well as the French, and the Marquis of Pombal ordered the Society of Jesus expelled from Brazil in 1759. Spain followed suit in 1767. They attempted to curb the wealth and power of other ecclesiastical institutions. Also, Brazil began to move south to establish its borders against Spain, encroachment from Spain. This was especially true after the discovery of gold in Minas Gerais. The desire to protect the territory from the expansive Spanish who were located in Buenos Aires, just across the river from the Brazilians. This set up a conflict between Spain and Portugal over Jesuit reducciones east of the Uruguay River, resulting in a couple of wars, one in particular the Guarani War, also known as the War of the Seven Reductions, which was the result of the Treaty of Madrid. The Jesuits surrendered control of the missions in 1754, but the Guarani, led by Sepe Tiraju, refused to leave. No Jesuits fought in the war or were killed. Other reforms during the Bourbon reforms included economic development, liberalized free market policies, which created rapid economic and urban growth, particularly in trading ports such as Buenos Aires and Caracas. Also, large numbers of Iberian immigrants increased to Latin America from Iberia. Slaves declined in the late colonial period in most Spanish territories, but not in Brazil or in Cuba, where they were a part of the slave plantation economy. Also, the Bourbons attempted to develop the urban centers and urban planning. There was a philosophical enlightenment in Latin America and a developing Creole consciousness. The spread of the cult of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico in 1531 through 1648 was also an important part of this process. Naturally, there was resistance to these reforms among the people. New taxes and other administrative changes brought resistance, sometimes even violent protests. Riots in Quito, Ecuador broke out in 1765. In Mexico City, there were riots in 1767 protesting the expulsion of the Jesuits, who were popular among the people. In 1781, there was a Comunero revolt in Colombia, in which 20,000 people marched on Bogota in protest of new taxes. And there was also a changing climate in the age of revolution. A colleague of mine has written a book on the role of climate change in creating population instability and drought and famine and facilitating the outbreak of revolutions. In Brazil, there were a number of conspiracies. Overzealous bureaucrats attempted to raise taxes, and this provoked a revolt in Minas Gerais in 1788. These Brazilian rebels, or revolutionaries, proposed a new democratic republic inspired by the American Revolution. They were led by Joaquim José da Silva Xavier, who was also known as Tiradentes. He was that means tooth puller, since he was a dentist. He was executed as the leader of this group of conspirators in 1789. In 1799, another rebellion broke out in Bahia, inspired by the French Revolution, led by some 20 free mulatto officers, junior officers. In Peru, there was the greatest and most widespread rebellion that actually scared the Spanish and threatened the colonial order. There was a lack of land for Native Americans. There was resentment among the Native Americans and the mestizos for the mita and the reparto de mercancías. The rebels were led by a mestizo, Curaca José Gabriel Condor Canqui. He was a mestizo, but he also had a position as an Indian chief. He killed a corregidor, Antonio de Arriaga, and changed his name to Tupac Amaru II, which allowed him to tap into the heritage of the Incas, who had resisted for 40 years the Spanish imposition. And he was captured and executed in 1781, but the rebellion continued for 2 years. The rebellion of Tupac Amaru II and his successors terrified the Spanish authorities, and actually led to Peru being very conservative during the Wars of Independence. So, in conclusion, there was a changing political climate in the 18th century. A phrase that summed this up quite well was "Viva el rey y muera el mal gobierno." This means that they would say, "Long live the king and death to bad government." So it was a way of protesting the administration of the Bourbon reforms without directly criticizing the king. The people claimed to be loyal to the king, but they protested those who represented him. There were a number of reasons why Latin Americans were slower than the North Americans or the English colonists to assert their independence. One of those reasons was that they were afraid. The Creole elite was afraid that if they broke with the crown, that they would then find themselves opposed by the lower classes. The slave population or the Native American population would rise up against the Creoles, and so they were hesitant to initiate revolution because of the diversity and fragmentation of Latin American ethnic groups. There was also a self-perceived vulnerability among the Latin American elites. There was also the troubled times of the Age of Revolution. In some countries with a large Native American population, such as the center part of Mexico and Peru, the highlands of Peru, they tended to be very conservative and to resist the wars of independence against the Spanish. However, in other places, such as Caracas and Buenos Aires, which were trading cities, port cities, depended upon smuggling and depended upon free trade with Anglo merchants, English merchants, as well as North American Yankees, there was much more willingness to separate from Spain and pursue a different approach to governance and economics. And so it was a great deal of diversity all over Latin America as they approached this period of the Age of Revolutions, which we will continue with in our discussion next week.